Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Instead of telling someone right or wrong, you could just show them Draco Malfoy. And then let them look and say, I don't want to be Draco Malfoy. I want to be Harry Potter. I want to be Hermione Granger.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. Today, I have Ken DeSTEFANO on the show. He is an attorney living in New York who is also a domestic adoptee that was born in the late 1960s. He was raised in a caring and loving home. As an adoptee, he has had a largely happy life, but always wondered about the unknown. That curiosity led to a search for his own birth mother and a reunification with her. His debut novel, I Will See You Again, Hearts Will Sing, tells the story of two people whose past, present, and future lives are inexplicably linked. In 2024, DeSTEFANO was selected by the Tucson Festival of Books for recognition as an indie author. Here is my interview with Ken DeSTEFANO. We are welcoming Ken DeSTEFANO to the show today. Hi, Ken.
Yeah. How are you doing today? Good to talk to you.
I'm great. So we're going to talk about the book in a minute because I have 1,000 questions about it, and it's super unique. So that's what I liked about it. It wasn't like any of the other adoptee books that I've read, so loved that. But we'll get into that in a minute. I want to kind of talk about your adoption story, what you know about it, so we can kind of see where you, what your background is and where you're coming from.
Sure. I was born in 69. My birth mother, late 60s, was basically presented with a choice. Her life was going on a career arc. And when she got pregnant, it probably changed a little bit. And she had a hard decision to make. From what I understand, it was a very difficult decision. I was in a hospital for a couple weeks while she was trying to decide what to do. Ultimately got adopted by a very loving family, mother, father, older brother, and older sister, both biological to my parents, myself 5 years later, and then a younger brother who's also adopted 11 years later. Very loving home, great people. In the adoptee community, they talk about this a lot. I really think everything they did, they were trying to do for the right reasons. They were coming at it from the right place.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some things that could have been handled a little differently, but you can never blame someone for not knowing something they were never taught.
Exactly. Did you always know you were adopted?
I always knew, and it was always a big part of my, the legends I would create in my mind, my mythology, like where'd I come from? I didn't say it in those ways because I was too young much of my life, but I always, would talk about things and try and figure out the puzzle. And it wasn't an itch like it became later. I had the experience that many people have seeing your biological children born, and also then there's mirroring.
Yeah.
And then that leads to a series of things, and then eventually the search process.
Yeah. So how was it growing up in that adoptive family? Sounds like it was pretty positive.
It was very positive. I'd say it was very positive, but I'm different than them. I look relatively like them, but I don't. And I think my mind works different from theirs, not better or worse. I see things uniquely my way, which is not their way. So there was always that feeling that there was something a little bit wrong because I wasn't thinking of things the way they had thought of things.
Right.
One of the things is I was always a very compliant, easygoing, pleasant child, except for family pictures. I hated and still hate getting my picture taken.
Really?
I never knew why, but now it's probably because I don't look like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it just really jumps out at me that I feel very uncomfortable seeing pictures of myself, especially with respect to the family. To go a little deeper, like even now, I'm 55 years old, I still really can't even look myself in the mirror. If anybody sees this, my hair is always a little messy. I'm always a little bit disheveled because I'm just so uncomfortable with the way I look in the mirror because I don't look like those people that were around me. And I guess part of my brain thought I was supposed to look like.
Yeah. So it sounded like you had some questions about your adoption growing up as a child.
Yeah.
Like, what were you thinking? What was like your thought? Just like, well, who's my mother and where'd I come from? And
Yeah, just trying to understand. It didn't make sense. Like there was something like in the brain operating before logic can operate. Like when you're at 4, 5, 6, knowing that something was wrong. In my book, I use the word motherverse. The baby grows up in the motherverse in
I
the
love
womb,
that. Yeah.
and then all of a sudden there's this ripping apart. So on the pre-logical part, you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And I think part of me was very well adjusted, did very well, but always wondered. There is, stories of me trying to come up with stories of what was happening, not in an angry, bitter way, but just trying to, untie the knot, figure out the puzzle.
Yeah. And how, looking back, do you see that adoption shaped you? You were talking about not liking, your appearance because you didn't look like anyone. Any other things that you could look back on and say, I did that because I was, maybe because I was adopted?
How much time do we have? Uh, oh, it's rejection, in all my relationships. You know, if I call someone and they don't call me back in a half hour, doesn't mean they're rejecting me. It might just mean they're busy or have other things going on,
Mhm.
but my brain would go there. Um, Being a pleaser, like searching what people want from me and then try and be that so that I could not be rejected. I think that very much became part of my psyche in a way, in a very fundamental level. And it's something that as I've gotten older, I'm starting to think about in a different way. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or talk about it
Yeah, go
later.
ahead. Like, when did you kind of start bringing that correlation?
Well, the way I started thinking about it differently was actually fairly recently. And it's reading a lot of the great work that so many adoptees are doing here about healing and all of that. And I kind of had this moment where I'm saying, listen, I'm never going to be healed.
Mm,
Somebody is born a certain way. Um, Somebody's born without a hand. That's never going to heal. It's learning to tie a shoe with one hand.
yeah.
So for me as an adoptee, that primal wound, that separation, it's never going to heal. It's learning to train my brain so that when these scenarios happen, I don't immediately go to that dark place
Mm,
that really isn't accurate, but my brain wants to go there so badly. And I just have to pull it back to a more balanced, realistic vision of the world. And the other thing I say with regard to that is I find it's extremely simple, but very difficult and never, simple doesn't mean easy.
yeah.
It's simple to know what I'm doing wrong, but this boy, that mind is just like a bull pulling you in one direction and you want to do it. And it's hard. But you keep saying,
Yeah.
come on, you have to keep trying to pull back.
So do you think that we can't heal from the primal wound? That it's just something that we need to learn to kind of deal and cope?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I'm an imbecile. So I have no idea. Like I'm listening to people who are much more well-versed, much more studious about this. I'm talking from a layman's point of view. I don't think I can heal. I'm not even sure. Smarter people than me can probably show me I'm wrong. But I just don't think healing is possible because I think it's broken.
Mm.
It's not a broken leg that's going to heal if you set it and give it time. It's more
And
like that person born without a limb. That limb's never grown, but they
yeah,
have to learn to live a happy, adjusted life, knowing that that's one part of their personality. That's
right.
one part of them that is always going to be that way. And if you want to be an optimist, which is also simple but not easy, is well, in a certain way, that's what makes them beautiful, isn't it?
In what way?
You know, someone who's got something that's a little different about them, and they learn to make it an essence of what they are, a good part of what they
Hmm.
are. It's what makes
Yeah.
you special. And I think that can be, you know, I'm a Yankee fan. Jim Abbott, one-handed pitcher, threw a no-hitter.
Yeah.
Lots of pitchers have thrown a one-hitter. Not many have done it with one hand.
So what are some of the superpowers that you think you gained from being adopted?
I think I'm very observant of people, of reading people.
Yeah.
When I'm talking, what are they looking at? What are they agreeing to? What am I saying to them that's invigorating them? So I know to keep going in that direction because I'm pleaser. I also think I'm quite the good puzzle solver. When
Mm,
I trying to make make a mess, turn it into sense. I'm very good at taking things and pulling them apart. And I say from the moment, going back to the natural born child, they live in that motherverse, and then they're with the mother, everything makes sense. We come out, nothing makes sense. So we have to start using our brain in a different way that a non-adoptee child doesn't. And I think we're just developing skills when the brain is soft and mushy, that serve us well in life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, can lead us into like some overly crazy ways, me. But I think those are a couple of things that are definitely there. And being a pleaser is a terrible thing, but it also can be a good thing in your professional life, depending on what you do.
Right.
To me, it's very interesting.
Yeah. So let's talk about reunion a little bit.
Sure.
When did you really start diving in, and why did you want to search?
New Jersey passed a law saying you could get your original birth certificate. I found out about it during, I guess, the summer of 2016, and the birth certificate is going to be available in January. So I went, submitted the form, actually went to the post office and got a money order because I didn't even want my wife to know I was doing this because I was so torn about it. Submitted it. It eventually came. And I remember sitting there looking at it saying, I'm going to open this envelope. My life's never going to be the same. Do I really want to do this? And of course,
Yes,
the old
and
me
I
would
want to
just
ask you something right now. So in the book, I
yes,
have the page memorized because it's like burned into my brain of the character opening the envelope. Now, was that really what happened? And was that really what was on the birth certificate?
no, it is
Okay.
not what happened.
Okay.
It happened at home in a similar way, in that I sat there thinking, do I really want to do this? What Melissa's referring to is there's a reference where I'm identified on the birth certificate as bastard because
Yes.
there's no father. There's a cover letter that came with the birth certificate that many New Jersey people know that says it might say bastard because that's the way they labeled it sometime. And to try and kind of pull the reader in a little bit, I thought that was kind of
Well, it did.
a
I
powerful
was like,
grab.
I have to know if that really happened.
Yeah,
Page 143, I know the page. I was just
yeah.
like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
So yeah, a father, I think it said none or something like that, but something also quite disturbing.
Yeah. Okay. So back to your story. So you
Sure.
sorry, I had to interrupt there for a second. So getting back to when you did petition to get your
Right.
non-identifying information or the birth certificate.
Yeah, and in New Jersey, it's not even a petition; you just wrote a letter to the Department of Health, and it came,
Wow.
and the name was there, and it was a little kind of a common name. So I spent 4 or 5 months on Google looking,
Oh my
looking,
gosh.
looking, and then pretty much got pretty close. And I knew I was there, and I had everything but the phone number. And there are elements of the phone call in the book that were accurate.
Okay.
But that
Now, was DNA a thing at this time? No.
it was a thing, but it wasn't a tool I used. I have 23andMe, some relatives, but that has not really been a helpful part of the search.
Okay. And how did your adoptive parents feel about you finding your biological mom? Were they still around?
My biological father passed away in 97. I still have a very close relationship with my mother. She's handled it well, but it's not easy. It's awkward. We're pleasers. We know that doing this hurts them. Even if they're smiling and looking at us, we know it hurts them.
Yeah.
So it's tense, and it's
Yeah.
tense for everybody. But when you're wired to please somebody who very much took you in, and you're hurting them, it's
Yeah.
hard. It's tense.
It is it is tough. What advice would you give to someone that's thinking about searching?
There's many steps that you will be taking. Many of them are small. Every time you take a step, just make sure it's the step you want to take, and be deliberative, be thoughtful. Don't do it because people are saying, oh my God. Like if you live in a social circle, people are saying, oh my God, you got to find out because people want to talk about it because
Yeah.
it's one of the few times in life people find me interesting at the restaurant. But that can't
Mm-hmm.
be the reason to do it. It's got to be because you do it, because this will change your life,
Yeah.
in good ways and in bad ways. I've had a very successful reunion story. It's still not easy, um, but I know a lot of stories have gone very badly.
Yeah.
But at some point, it has to be your decision. Part of my ultimate thought was, and this might not be a great thought. So again, I'm no brainiac or anything. Is there going to come a time when I wished I had done it and it was too late?
Mm,
And will I ever forgive myself for that?
yeah.
Because I
How
knew
did,
there is
go ahead.
something wrong in me, right? I'm an adoptee. There's something wrong. So it has to be addressed. It
Mm.
had to be addressed.
How did the reunion with your birth mother go?
It went very well. And she's in our lives. She's in my kids' lives. I have two half sisters and a half brother. We're in each other's lives. It's gone well, but family is complicated, and especially in this situation, it's complicated.
Yeah. Did you find out who your birth father was?
I got some pretty good leads, but um, I think at this point that search is really not going to go much further until maybe another time.
Mm, okay.
But and as I don't have the burn really with regard to that I did with respect to my birth mother.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a man and it's a father. Maybe it's because you're inside the mother for 9 months. You're not inside the man. Like he comes by and, back in those days, gives mom a cigarette and a glass of wine every couple of weeks at best. But so
Yeah.
it's different. I don't know, but it's just, without trying to explain it, it just is. And I've heard other people say there are times in people's lives where that becomes more important, but it hasn't for me.
Yeah. So was there a time or a thing that kind of took you out of the fog? Do you remember? Was it having your kids, or was this just something gradual that came on, or was there a certain thing that happened that kind of,
Well, having the kids, you look in the eyes and you see something you've never seen before, which is you. You see as they get older, they act a certain way that really irritates you. And you can't get irritated at them because they got it exactly from you. It's exactly what you were doing at that age. So you can't really run and hide.
right?
And what everybody's life is different, but I think a fairly typical lifestyle, I'm talking to other adoptees, is you have kids when you're at a point where you're building your life, you're trying to pay a mortgage, you're trying to pay your rent, you're trying to get a job. Kids are little, so you're running them all over the place. So even like all those realizations start happening with the mirroring, but you're too busy. Now my youngest is 20, my oldest is 24. So a couple of years ago, it wasn't 24 hours a day putting out fires. It was starting to be able to breathe and think a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of that time like caught up when they were in their high school years. And
Did you,
that's when I started to feel it more.
yeah. Did you see any resemblance or any mirroring with your birth family?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very much so.
Like
Very
what kind
much
of
so.
things did you notice?
Well, the first thing I'd say is when I said I think differently, like there's kind of an outside the box way they tend to think of the world. And I think of it too. And it's just, you put 80 people in the room, show them something, 75 are going to think one thing happened, five are going to view it totally differently. Me and my birth family are the other five. That's just the way it is. A little bit of a tip to what we're going to talk about later. My birth mother was a college swimmer. And it turns
So that
out,
was true. Okay. That was another question I had if that was okay.
Turns out I've got some natural ability that I never tapped to swim. And that came through.
Wow. How about just, like the way they laugh or a movement or the way they talk or
My half brother, you see this thing sticking up? That's always sticking up in my hair. My
yeah.
half brother has the exact same thing. He's laughed about
Oh,
it. We
that's
laughed
too
about it
funny.
together. Um, Crazy. I'm a lawyer now. Both my birth mother and I were bartenders for years. It's just like
Wow.
crazy things. I have done some endurance events in my life, mostly in the water. My half sister is an ultra marathon runner.
Mm. Wow.
So there just seem to be like little things like that.
Yeah.
Adoptee, are you struggling with identity and authenticity? You are not alone. Somatic Mindful Guided Imagery can help you rediscover your true self and embrace your unique journey. Find clarity and confidence within. Visit somatichealingjourneys.com today and start your path of self-discovery and empowerment.
So let's talk about the book.
Sure.
It is a novel and not a memoir.
Yes, it is.
So talk about that.
Well, first, I'm kind of new to the community. And as I am listening to Anne Heffron, and I had a great editor named Diane Shiflett who helped me with the book and got me into a festival. They were pointing me towards all these amazing memoirs. And I just thought, first, they're doing a great job. What they are speaking to the adoptee community. And for some reason, I didn't know that wasn't where I wanted to go. And if you noticed, if you got to the very end, I wrote a little letter at the end. The book was written for adoptees. That's great. Really, those books are written for adoptees. But I started thinking maybe my niche was to not adoptees, but to people who knew adoptees, to people who knew birth mothers. And if you're going to do that, maybe a novel is a little bit softer. Instead of telling someone right or wrong, you could just show them Draco Malfoy. And then let them look and say, I don't want to be Draco Malfoy. I want to be Harry Potter. I want to be Hermione Granger. I assume everybody knows those references. It's Harry Potter. And there's points in the book, with the adopting family where they struggle with finding out that there was reunion.
Yeah.
So when they're struggling, hopefully I've built a character so the reader feels with the male character, the adopted character. Hopefully when those people read that and they feel the rejection by the adopting family, they say, "Ooh, that's not the way I would want to be." And so when they have that experience, then when someone who adopted a child comes and talks to them about it, they can have a very casual conversation saying, no, that's very natural for them to want to say it. So to me, it's a much softer way to kind of open people's eyes to make them less defensive.
Yeah, true. And that's what I love. I think there needs to be more books written about adoptees that aren't memoirs, because that includes everyone, not just adoptees or birth parents or whatever. And that helps educate the world about adoption, those kind of stories, and integrating, these truths about this is really how we feel. This is, these are possibilities that can happen, and opening that conversation up and to people that maybe don't even know someone that's adopted, or if they come across someone that's adopted, they can have a better conversation.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, another part of it was, and this goes to something we said a couple minutes ago, I was always trying to figure out the mystery of my adoption. So when I was very little, I made up a story about my birth mother being a crossing guard. Actually happened. Didn't happen in the way it happened in the book, but I actually made up that story. And I think really what this book was a continued attempt to maybe me figure out why, even though I'd actually met the person who did it, to really figure out why is my life the way it is? Why did this happen? And it was a nice way to explore it for me. And frankly, there's also another element, and I don't mean to beat this to a dead horse, is I'm adopted. That's a big part of me. But I tried to write the characters. That's not all they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes I read stuff and I feel the main character, all they are is an adopted person. And me as an adoptee person, that's a very big part of what I am, but it's not everything that I am.
Yeah.
So that's where I was trying to flesh out fuller characters and make this an important part of them. So it was a challenge.
You definitely
did
that. Yeah, you did that. That's good. So the title, I Will See You Again, Hearts Will Sing. How did you come up with that title? I mean, I get the I will see you again maybe part, but where did the Hearts Will Sing come in?
Well, I came up with I Will See You Again. And then I realized if I made that the title and someone Googled it, they would come up with 10,000 things, including songs and Bible verses. So I had to tie it into something. And there's a Bible verse. I'm not particularly religious, but there's a Bible verse that says, "I will see you again, hearts will rejoice."
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I changed it to sing because there's a music subtext in the book. So I
Yeah.
thought that fit well.
Yeah.
You want to hear something really cool?
Yeah. Tell me.
The
Tell us.
the cover. Have you seen the cover of
Yes,
this?
I love the cover. It's like one of my favorites.
It's a picture my daughter took for her photography class
Oh,
in college,
wow.
and that's her in the red dress.
That's
It's
your
a
daughter?
in the red dress.
I was going to ask if that was your birth mother or who that was. Yeah.
Yeah, she took this selfie for a photography class. And the really cool thing is there's a critical scene towards the end where the birth mother, and now as an older woman, is going to meet the adopted child. And it describes her wearing, I get goosebumps when I talk about this. She's getting ready. She's doing her crazy hair and everything. It describes her wearing a red dress with yellow flowers.
Yeah.
I wrote that before this picture was taken. And
Oh my
my
gosh.
daughter never saw this language. So the fact
Wow.
that I wrote that, and then she took a selfie of herself for a photography class, basically wearing the dress that's described in the book, it seemed very karmic to me.
Yeah. That's why I thought it was your mom, your birth
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I love the cover of that book. I love it. What about the other character, the larger character with the dark hair?
That's in Asbury Park. There's a mural on the shore, and it's actually
Oh,
full color.
oh wow.
But we bleached it out, and then she had taken a picture of herself in front of that. We bleached out the rest, kept her in vibrant color to pop, and that's how we put it together.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So I'm dying to ask what percentage of your book is true
100,
to your story.
100%, but only about 25% is accurate.
Okay.
So that's a little bit flipped there. It's what I tried to do. There's some things that are just dead on accurate, but what I tried to do is think about feelings I had at different points in my life and construct circumstances that showed them. So I took a lot of liberties to make them more interesting because I'm not a very interesting person. I also, the birth mother angle, that history, I know a little bit about, like the size of the family, but most of that is just fiction.
Yeah. That was good. I loved that whole dynamic and like her telling her family. Well, she didn't really tell them, but how they found out.
Yeah.
And then what followed after that, and just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, and I liked how you did one chapter kind of on talking about the birth mother and then flipped to the adoptee, kind of as an adult and flipped back and forth. I love that.
Well,
It
I'll
kept
tell
my
you,
interest.
I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. So my concern was I thought the Carson, that's the adoptee story, was important, but I didn't think it was terribly interesting until later. So the flip back and forth was like to keep the reader engaged
Yeah.
until we got to the more interesting stuff. Because, the birth mother storyline is Jersey Shore, which actually was a fascinating time. It was an amazing time down the shore. And that, to me, that was a very vibrant story. And it pulled the reader to other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really started getting interested in Carson when the whole swimming things was happening. And I was just like, I gotta find out what happens next.
So I know what the next question is, I think.
What?
The swim?
Yeah, did you?
I did both swims.
Wow.
Yeah. Alcatraz and the 8 Mile swim. I did them.
Oh my gosh. Now the whole scenario with your tracker lady in the canoe, was that true?
Most of it.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay, you just
We
have to
got
read
lost.
the book. You got to read the book. Find out what happened. Oh my gosh. So was it difficult or cathartic writing this? I mean, it wasn't like totally your story, but did you feel some healing from it, or how was it kind of diving
Yes. Yes. Yes, everything.
in.
I work full time. I work for the university. I'm a lawyer. I have a job in labor and employment law. I wrote this at nights and on the weekends, page one to the last page in just under 3 months. Then, 9 months of edits and rewrites, but that was the
Yes.
story. Incredible. I went dark places, right? It took me to very dark places. It was exhausting. And it was very hard to address some things that I didn't want to address. But Anne Heffron, who many people know,
I love Anne.
told me, those places you don't want to go, that's where you have to go. That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah.
So
Did anyone in your family, after reading the book, were they like, did you really feel this way? Did that happen? And how did they react?
I've had really good conversations with my mom and my sister, like, because like I never had, it's going to sound like evaluative, but I never had the courage to tell them these things to their face. So they found out about it like in a sprint, something that I've been thinking about over a marathon, right? And they've been very receptive to discussions. Still very hard, still very hard to discuss it. But all you could hope it would be.
Yeah. So when you told your siblings about, I know it was part of the book, but was that true when you told
That
them
wasn't,
that wasn't true? How did they react? Were they okay with it?
they were okay. I in the book, there's a couple scenes about that. And that's why I say true, but not accurate, because nothing happened in the diner. There was anything like that. But I think that was accurately depicted their emotional journey, which was, wait, why? What's wrong with us? Why did you need to do this? Which I think is very much the natural reaction of a lot of adopted siblings of adoptees.
Yeah.
And birth parents. Why? Like, are you saying we did something wrong? Are you saying we weren't good enough and all of this? I think that's natural. So they went through that, but then ultimately it came out in a good way.
Yeah.
Which it mostly has.
Yeah. What do you hope that people that read your book, what do you hope they learn or get out of it?
I hope different people get different things. I hope adopting, to me, the toughest group is adoptees. And I think there's so much good stuff out there that's so much more profound and insightful that I have, that I don't hope to give them anything. I think there's better places. I just didn't want them to feel like I betrayed them in the book. That was it.
How did adoptees and adoptive parents and birth parents respond?
In the adoptee community, I've been gotten a little involved, and people, okay, I'm going to try and do something different here. How did you feel about that? Do you think that it's true to an adoptee story of what an adoptee feels?
Yeah, definitely.
And
I do.
I think that's kind of a lot of the feedback I've gotten from adoptees. For the adopting parents, what I want them to get is to understand that when their child looks for reunification, it's not a judgment. It's part of them finding something that they have to find peace. For many of them, not all of them. For adopting parents that are raising children, just understand, like you might have thought this, but like the greatest thing my adopting parents did was treat me exactly like their other children. It was no stronger sign of love.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. I
Yeah.
was different.
Yeah.
And so just keep the mind open to that. And then I really think a lot of the adopting families are going to become more acceptable when people in their peer groups understand the situation, so that when, at this point, a lot of the adopting mothers are 60s, 70s, 80s. When they're talking to those other 60s, 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
like my goal would be that, Josie, who's an adopting mother, goes over to Antoinette and tells her this. Oh my God, my son went and is looking for his birth mother. And Antoinette says, "Oh yeah, they all do that. Why are you upset about that?" that's kind of what I want.
Yeah. When you said you were just kind of newly diving into the adoptee communities, did anything surprise you when you finally kind of connected with other adoptees?
I think one of the things I came to realize, and I'd be curious your thoughts, is how lonely it had been, because I'm dealing with something that nobody else could understand.
Yeah.
That if you grow up in a close family, you realize that your biggest problems you share with your adopting family, you share with your family. That's who you go to. This is the one thing, the biggest thing, and it's the one thing you can never go to them. So it's a very isolated existence. And you feel like, I don't know, the last dinosaur. You feel like it's just you out there in a world where everybody else is normal. And I've met a lot of adoptees. I was at an event in New York City. I went to the Tucson Festival of Books. We had an adoptee author thing, booth that Diane set up. We're all different. Boy, there's something we share. And nice, that feeling that, oh, I'm not alone, is really special. And I've had a few adoptees reach out to me. One I'm having breakfast with tomorrow morning, who's just, they felt that you can never talk to anybody about this. And I just love the fact that people, are starting to feel more comfortable. And I love the fact that I realize now I'm part of something, not a leader, just one of the bees in the hive. And we're special people. We've overcome a lot, and we're impressive people.
Yeah. Yeah. So how has this book kind of opened doors for you?
Um, it really hasn't. I'm not great at marketing, something I have to try and get a little better at. It's something, I'd love to be able to do more. I think, honestly, when I first wrote it, I wrote a bunch of pages to Diane. I sent them to her and I said, listen, is this a skill I have? Like, is this something I can do, regardless of my thoughts or like, can I actually write? Like I could practice basketball all day. I'm never gonna be able to dunk a basketball. I'm never gonna be good enough. And the book has kind of made me realize I can physically write if I could get the right story. I could put words, I could bring the reader in to what I'm trying to accomplish. And I'm submitting to contests. I'm trying to get it out there on social media. I'm going to change my answer and tell you that when I was at the Adoptee Book Festival, there were a few instances where people came up to me, not in our group, but strangers came up, and we had conversations about adopting. One was an aunt of an adopted child, another was an adopting mother.
Wow.
And from where that conversation started to where it ended in 15 minutes, it really one of the, outside of my family and my kids, some of the most satisfying moments of my life. Like being part of seeing somebody open their eyes and see the world in a different way was just amazing.
Yeah.
We were there, and there was a woman who brought her young, probably 12 or 13-year-old child up who she adopted, and bought her some books, and we were talking. And then they disappear. And then 5 minutes later, the mom comes back and says, I just want to let you know, my daughter just said, finally, there's a booth for me.
Oh.
And I had no involvement with talking to the girl. It was some other people.
Oh my gosh.
Boy, it was just like every one of us just started crying. It's amazing.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
How old was the child?
About 12.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. Did you start writing the book before you got back into the community, or was it the other way around?
I was done with the book before I got into it.
Really? That
Yeah.
shocks me.
Yeah.
That's pretty insightful without digging into the community. Because I mean, like you said, I was kind of blind to a lot of, or not blind, but it was kind of like things that we weren't getting validated because we weren't talking about it. And so it was almost not real, like your feelings and around it, surrounding adoption and things like that, until you start talking to other people. And then that kind of opens up and gives permission,
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
in fact, I say it all the time. Sometimes I'm like, I go on Facebook and I'm like, we're we're not supposed to say that. We can't talk about that. You know, in these private groups. But at the same time, it was so freeing to like being like, oh my gosh, yeah, I feel the same way. And now I can talk about it. So I'm shocked that you had such insight without getting into the community first, that you wrote it first.
Well, I had read Anne's book, and then my editor, Diane, who helped me so much, she's involved. So she was helping me going back and forth. But there came a point, like once I got down, I personally stopped reading. I read Anne books. I didn't want to read anything else because maybe it's an adoptee thing. I was afraid I would co-opt it. I was afraid I would steal it even without even knowing it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I almost like walled off everything else. So everything that was coming through was my own. And you know, it's a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. How was reading Anne's books? Did that feel validating to you?
Anne's book is really, you know, the one moment was when, you know, my son and my daughter were born. But then reading Anne's book, I was sitting out on my patio. I can still think of the moment, just saying, how did this woman in Massachusetts and California read my mind? And that was the "You Don't Look Adopted" one. It's just literally she's saying things that my mind is saying verbatim. How is this possible? Yeah. And I sent her an email, and I just said, Anne, just want to let you know, I read the book. I'm an adoptee. Unbelievable. Blew me away.
Yeah.
And you know, you do that. And you never hear. Like 15 minutes later, I get an email from Anne.
Yeah.
And that led to a writing session. But yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. I love the way she writes because she makes you laugh at something that just is so horrible. You know, I mean, if you really think about it, and other people probably reading a book like that would be like, that's not funny, you know, but the way she writes it, and I just think back on some of the things and I'm just like, really, that's not funny, but it is freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
To an adoptee.
She's not afraid to go there.
Yeah.
Wherever there is, she goes there.
Yeah. Wherever it is, she's going to go. Yeah. I love it. So what would you like struggling adoptees to know?
Not alone. That thing I found out once I started, you know, going to events and talking to people, you know, been on a couple podcasts. When I went to Tucson, Diane told me to submit for the Independent Author Award. I never even knew about it. I submitted, worked out well. And there was another adoptee who was accepted, Emma Stevens. And so I got to know Emma, and Emma's amazing, and her books are amazing.
Yeah.
And just, you know, and then at the Adoptee Authors, there were so many people, Tony and Jen and Paul and all these people and Angie, and there's so many great people. And just the more people you get to know, that it feels like you're alone, but you're not. And don't be afraid, because the things, like you were just saying about Anne, the things you're afraid to admit you think, other people are thinking them too.
Yeah, they are. That is so true. Yep. Get into the community, dive in. It's very validating. I mean, it can be a little crazy. So, you know, be careful what you read and what you get involved in. But I think for the most part, you know, 90% is a positive thing. For that. Is there anything else that we're not talking about that you want to talk about?
I just want to, you know, thank so many of the people that have helped me, the Dianes, the Anne, you, for having me on this episode, on the show. I hope, I'm proud of the book. I'm proud of the book because I think it can help the right person. And you know, anybody, I think there's a lot of really good people involved in the adopting community. I think a lot of the adopting parents sometimes, you know, get marginalized as bad people from certain sectors, and there are bad people, but there's a lot of people who just did the best they could, and we can reach them if we speak the same language to them.
Yeah. Where can we find your book?
It's on Amazon. I Will See You Again, Hearts Will Sing. I think there might be a link going up. I also have a Instagram, which I'm trying to get more active on. And I think I'm on Facebook also. We'll get it out there.
Awesome. All the links will be in the show notes.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed the book and this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for being so generous.
Yeah. Listeners, thanks for listening today, and take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.
This podcast is created for educational purposes by the telling of adoption experiences. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or Mind Your Own Karma.